what I wanted to do was talk to you about the debate.
Mhm.
I would love to talk to you about this environment
Yeah.
of misinformation and fake news and that kind of thing. Um, and then I would love, although we are here for you,
Yeah.
I would love to have your thoughts on the presidential race to
Yeah.
bring it all home. But first of all, like I said, I want to talk about that debate.
Mhm.
And first things first, what was not discussed in the debate that you would like to talk about?
Yeah. Well, look, I think in those debate settings, you have such a limited time, and given the the constraints of the rules and the process you got to go through, it's a lot. It's a lot that's mentioned, right? Because there are a lot of people in this district. This district is huge. It's 13 counties. It runs basically from Mobile to Montgomery and Mississippi to Georgia. So the issues are serious and they vary. But at the debate, we were able to touch on a lot of them. But I think one a critical one that we did not have the opportunity to spend a lot of time on, and that's the future of Alabama and how rooted that is in our education systems, right?
Mm,
And how we are planning and preparing our future generations of workers at the end of the day. Because we know that unless a company is coming to your community for a natural resource that you provide, the most important asset that you can provide is a workforce, is a
that's
labor
right.
force. Labor force is the people that are going to be there to help stand up the company, to help the company grow, expand, and provide the type of service or manufacture the type of good that the company is there for. And so we have an obligation here in the state of Alabama. We have an obligation to make sure that if we're serious about economic growth, if we're serious about economic vitality of our communities, if we're truly serious about those things, if we're serious about workforce development, if we're serious about job training, we have an obligation to make sure that we are investing in our education systems, particularly our public education systems, because what we know is this: is that somewhere near 90% of people in the state of Alabama graduated from public schools.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Regardless of how you feel personally about public versus private versus charter, there's a stark reality, right? And there's a mathematical reality, right? And that mathematical reality is this: is that there are not enough private and charter schools to educate the masses here in the state of Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not.
Mm-hmm.
And we won't have that type of infrastructure, right? Private schools and charter schools will not grow at that rate to educate 85+% of students here in the state of Alabama. So what does that mean? That means we have to invest and be serious about investing in our public education system. And that is something that we can't say that we are serious about workforce development if we are in a state, if we're led by leadership, i.e. Republican leadership, that is making cuts to the largest workforce development program that we have in this state, and that's our public education system. And that's I'm a product of public education. I was born and raised in Mobile. I attended elementary school, middle school, high school, all public schools. Graduated from John L. LaFleur High School. I even went to public college and law school. At the University of Alabama. So I know what public school systems are capable of.
Mm-hmm.
I know what the experience are like. I have family members who teach. I have close friends who teach who are in education settings right now. And so I know the challenges that they face today are unique and different, but the goal and the expectations of them remain the same. And that's to produce the best type of student, the best type of future college student, future trade worker, the best type of citizen that they can produce, and the most equipped type of citizen that they can produce coming out of those hallways. And the state of Alabama is not serious about that. Right? We've just seen this last legislative session here at the state level. The state passed a quote unquote school choice bill that's going to remove at least $100 million away from public education here in the state of Alabama just over the next year. Right. So how are we able to say that we're being serious about it when we're making those cuts, to the system that's really preparing our future workers? We have to show our teachers we care about them. Like at the end of the day, teachers are the single most important profession. Teachers and school support personnel, the single most important professions to the future of this district, of this state, and of this country. And yet we're not investing in them the way that we should. right? Our teachers need to be paid more. They need to be working in more modernized and updated environments. They need to have the types of benefits that are conducive to being able to recruit and retain the best type of teachers, because those teachers are the ones that we are expecting to actually produce the future workers that we want to hold out as being an asset that we can use to recruit companies to set up shop in our communities. And if we're not putting our time, if we're not putting our money, if we're not putting our resources, our energy, and our effort behind, bettering our public education system, then we will continue to have outcomes like the sixth worst literacy rate here in the United States. It's something that's unacceptable. It's something that we just need to take the time to focus our investment and our resources to bolster our public education system.
With the state taking the steps that they've taken, including advocating, what does that look like from the federal level? How do you plan to make that difference at the federal level?
Yeah, so it's resources, right? The primary role of a member of Congress is to go to Washington, D.C. and pull back the resources to address the local issues that you have in your district. One issue that we know we need to address in this district is modernized school environments, making sure that every student is having the opportunity to be educated in an updated school environment. We still have schools in this district that struggle with basic internet access, right? And if we're trying to educate students in an outdated environment, then you're going to get outdated results. I mean, you probably remember the movie Lean on Me with Morgan Freeman, when he had that sort of first all staff meeting where he told the custodian, he said, tear down those cages in the cafeteria, because if you treat them like animals, that's exactly how they'll behave. And I don't say that to insinuate that we're treating our kids like animals. That's not what I'm saying. But I think what was, what he was suggesting in that statement, I think the core of that statement was the environment that you choose to educate your students in is going to be indicative of the outcomes that you get out. And so we're sending our students into outdated school buildings, and we're sending our students into schools that don't have the type of technology or the resources or the qualified teachers, to be able to compare with the students across this country. Then you're going to get results that don't reflect that. And so what we have to do at the federal level is make sure that we're pushing the resources here to the state of Alabama. Right, there's infrastructure investments we can make in building new schools. There's broadband deployment resources that we can make. We can actually incentivize schools to have types of programs that do things like make sure that our teachers here get paid time off when they decide to start a family of their own. Because here in the state of Alabama, a teacher, those teachers that we expect to take care of everybody else's children, when they decide to have a family of their own, you know how many paid days off they get in the state of Alabama?
I'm gonna guess none.
Zero.
Yeah.
Zero. Right? So how can you say that you're being serious about these things? How can you say that you value public education? How can you say that you value education in general? How can you say that you respect and appreciate teachers when that's the type of benefits that you're offering them? Right?
And it's also about luring teachers,
got to be able to recruit.
I would assume, to support our economic development.
Yeah, and it's not just recruiting, it's retaining.
You're right.
The average first-year teacher in the state of Alabama is out of the classroom by year 4. Right. And so, I had the benefit, I'm sure you had the benefit, many of us had the benefit of being educated by teachers that had been there 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years in some cases, right? Teachers that taught your siblings, teachers that even in some cases taught your parents, right?
That's right.
We don't have that as much anymore, right? And there's value in that continuity. There's value in that experience. There's a need for that type of experience, because at the end of the day, it's about positioning these children when they come out of school to be the most successful that they can possibly be, personally, economically, that they can be in their lives. And if we're not serious about providing that quality level of education, then we're going to continue to have issues like a very low literacy rate here in the state of Alabama. Like we're paid the 4th lowest wages in the United States of America, right? 4th lowest out of 50 states, right? The 4th lowest, right? So we have to be better at preparing a workforce that's going to be more enticing for companies to bring those higher paying jobs here to the state of Alabama.
Now, I read an article talking about the racist past of your opponent's family. You also brought up her being out of touch. I would love I got her response on it,
Yeah.
and I know what the article said. You were fact checked. What's your input on that whole issue?
Yeah. So
Right.
look, I think it's look, I think at the end of the day, it was an article that an independent news outlet put out.
Mm-hmm.
They did their own research on my side and her side as well. And look, I'll start by saying, look, none of what was mentioned in that article, not the slavery connections, not the Klan connections, she had nothing to do with that, right? She wasn't born. She certainly don't think she was born 100 years ago. But no, she wasn't born. But what I think the article did, right, what I think it highlighted, right, is a story that we see. It's someone who has reaped the benefits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who has reaped the benefits certainly of past actions of her family, right? Through no fault of her own, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't control the genetic lottery, but certainly have reaped the benefits. And I think now history has to inform us, right? My history informs me. I'm sure your history informs you.
Absolutely.
Right. And so when you have history in your family where you are the direct beneficiary, of slavery, right, of income and things and wealth that was derived from slavery, I think you have to be informed by that in the positions that you adopt now, right? And so, although she had nothing to do with it, she certainly can choose like what policy she advocates now, right? And so when we talk about, like, when I look at the history that I'm informed by, my father integrated University of Alabama's law school. All right. That means before my father went to University of Alabama's law school, people that looked like him were told, my uncle being one of them, you cannot come here because you are black, right? You can't come here, right? We don't allow black students to come to this institution, right? We know the history of school integration here. And we know that that's one of the core roles that Department of Education plays, right? Is ensuring equal access, is ensuring the civil rights are enforced for children of color, kids who look like me, kids who look like my father, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you come from a background where where your family wealth is generated, from slavery, I think that article also mentioned that she went to a school that to this day still has not enrolled a single African-American student, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a county like Monroe. Like, when you come from that environment where you have seen what it looks like, for the exclusion of people who don't look like you to certain types of opportunities, academic, employment, or otherwise, right? To be out here now advocating, saying, oh, we need to abolish the Department of Education. That's problematic.
Gotcha.
Right? Because the Department of Education is there to ensure equal access to education. To say you want to abolish it is not a very informed approach. I don't think personally to take. So it's just that, right? When you're talking about you want to abolish the Affordable Care Act, well, we know that's going to harm communities of color more than it harms the types of environments that my opponent grew up in, right? Mm-hmm. That's going to pull African Americans disproportionately high off of health insurance, right? Mm-hmm. And we already have the worst health outcomes in this district, almost anywhere in America, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if you're born here in the state of Alabama, you're expected to die before anybody else born almost in any other state in the United States of America, right? And I don't have to educate you on racial disparities in healthcare outcomes, right? Right. A lot of it has to do with access. A lot of it has to do with with resources, lack of economic opportunity, lack of jobs that provide healthcare insurance. And we know that the Black community is disproportionately impacted by that, right? The poor community is disproportionately impacted by that. And so at the end of the day, our future has to be informed by our past, mm-hmm. right? And for every family that has benefited, from that past, through no fault of their own today, totally understandable. Mm-hmm. But to everybody that has benefited, there was a flip side of that coin, right? So for your, you run a campaign saying you're fifth generation cattle ranch. Well, 5 generations ago, it wasn't called a cattle ranch, right? Right. So, 5 generations ago, it was a different place, right? 5 generations ago, it was building itself up. It was building the wealth. It was providing the opportunities for you to sit here today and say you grew up on a 5th generation cattle ranch and were able to go to Harvard and do all the things you had in your life. There's a flip side to that coin, because the people who were working on that cattle ranch 5 generations ago, their legacy, their generational wealth was not able to be obtained through that same lens, right? Through that same light. And that has nothing to do with my opponent, right? Right? She had nothing to do with that. But you have to acknowledge, you have to understand, and you have to be able to empathize with that struggle, right? My opponent's from Monroe County. Monroe County is the poorest county in this district. right? Which makes it one of the poorest counties in this state, which makes it one of the poorest counties in this country. She grew up incredibly wealthy in that county, right? They own she to this day owns millions of dollars worth of land there, right? Right? And so to see that, to grow up in that environment, right? To grow up amongst the richest people in the poorest county in this district, your policies have to reflect an understanding of the true challenge, the true lifestyle that people who weren't as blessed and weren't as fortunate as you have, right? And so that's when we say out of touch. That's what I mean, right? Like just genuinely out of touch. Monroe County is, I believe, is about 40, somewhere between 40 and 45% Black. Poverty rates there are through the roof, right? Educational outcomes are not what they need to be there, right? These are struggles that you didn't have to relate to, but you certainly saw, right? You certainly saw that in this community you grew up, that certain classes of people were treated differently than you. Certain classes of people didn't have the same opportunity to go to the private school as you, right? I think your policies just have to be reflective of that, because at the end of the day, this is America. We are one people. We can't change our history, but we can certainly let it inform our future, and what we do to make sure that everyone has those equal opportunities going forward.
Well said. I can't help but take note that you brought your dad up.
Mm-hmm.
I can't help but take note that, as I said the first time I met you, it warms my heart to see a Black man running for Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, what would your father think?
That's a good question, man. My dad's birthday, actually, incidentally, was just yesterday. It would have been 75, I believe. That's a good question. I mean, I was a kid when my dad died. I had literally just turned 11, but I'd like to think, that he'd be proud, right? Because a lot of the same things that we're pushing now are the same issues that he was fighting on, 3+ decades ago, right? It's life is cyclical in some ways, right? And unfortunately, here a lot of the issues that we deal with here in government and the things that we're trying to address community by community and county by county, a lot of that has stayed the same for far too long, right? Extreme rates of poverty, especially in our rural communities, lack of equal education access, right? Even just looking at the generalized sort of segregated nature in too many communities of educational opportunities, the lack of employment opportunities, the lack of focus and care and concern on too many communities, primarily communities of color and communities that don't come from generational wealth or don't have a lot of financial resources at their disposal. That's the same sort of thing that he was fighting for, right?
Yeah.
The same sort of thing that he was fighting for. And so, I'd like to think that we made him proud, right? I'd like to think that he is certainly, feeling that the work that he put in, that the blood, sweat, and the tears that he put in and making the strides that he made didn't go for naught, right? It didn't go in vain. It's something that has motivated me throughout my life, my father and my mother. It's just something that you can't sit in your hands. I mean, I went into federal government in part because of the experience of my father, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like my father, when he finished law school, my father went into law school just a few years after Alabama undergrad was integrated with the famous, standing the schoolhouse doors, right? And he went into law school, he came out of law school and immediately went into a place where he was working enforcing federal civil rights law, right? And that led to his involvement from everything in cases in Mobile and changing the local form of government to allow African Americans to have representation in the local form of government in Mobile, to integrating school systems in Mobile, to doing all of the things necessary to even create the first congressional district. One of the court cases that was literally cited to by the federal court in this case was called Figures v. Hunt, right? And that was one of the cases that was part of the process to create what is now Terry Sewell's district. And so it's my dad did a lot of work, and we're just grateful and thankful every day that we get to be here to try to continue that legacy.
I want to go backwards just a quick second.
Mm-hmm.
Very quickly. We talk about fake news and misinformation, all that kind of stuff. Has that infected your race in any way? Are there any things that you want to clarify, or have things been kind of, on the up and up? But, I just want to give you that opportunity.
Yeah, well, no, look, I think it's always a thing, right? Like it's always, messaging is critically important, and we should have trust in the information that's A, coming out of people's mouths, and B, certainly what's being presented in the media. I mean, I know we just ran into, just after you mentioned the last debate, we ran into this issue at the last debate, and I was hoping you would have asked me to start this show off with a joke again, because I had one ready. But no, it's but no, here's the realities of it, right? We got into this back and forth, my opponent and I, on this this net worth situation, right? So she's married into a billionaire family, undisputable, right? But to then come out of that and say, oh no, Shomari Figures is worth more than me, right? Like it's comical, it's fake news, and it's rooted in the fact that on her financial disclosures, they list the value of several of their most profitable LLCs, undetermined. Right? So it's just one of those things, man, where it's just almost comical, right? But like she owned millions of dollars of land in a trust in Monroe County. You know how much land millions of dollars gets you in Monroe County,
right?
And God bless them for that, right? Everybody wishes to be as financially successful as and blessed as they are, but to be so rich that you run from money is that's a new one to me, right? That when we say out of touch, right? Like that's what we're talking about, because people in this district, they don't run from money, right?
Right.
But I mean, that's it at the end of the day, man. But I think, look, beyond that, right? Like that's nothing at the end of the day, because that dispute between her, and myself, like that has nothing to do with what we're talking about at the end of the day, right? It's about how can you relate? How does your background? How does your upbringing? How does your current set of circumstances? How does your experience? How does your professional life? How does that position you to be able to relate to the people that we're trying to represent here? And that's something that applies to both of us. And but I think it also gets at the importance of the issues that we're out here talking about, right? What are we out here pushing, right? When you say, misinformation, disinformation, fake news, right? Like, what my mind goes to is this, right? We spend a lot of time, on this campaign talking about immigration. I've gone around this district, right? Maybe one person has mentioned immigration as an issue of concern, right? So we push this, and by we, I mean my colleagues and friends and my opponents on the Republican side. They push this issue of immigration and fear mongering around migrants and immigrants is just wild to me, right? When here in the state of Alabama, like, immigrants aren't the reason that the hospitals have closed in Union Springs, and Grove Hill, and Thomasville, right? Immigrants aren't the reason they don't have ambulance services that can get to you within an hour in Macon County or Crenshaw County, right? Immigrants aren't the reason that the only dialysis center in Crenshaw County just closed with very short notice just a couple months ago, right? And so, what I don't like in that space is like this whole misinformation and disinformation on the other side. It appears that their game plan is like, hey, let's find the nearest Democrat, immigrant, or gay person, and let's just blame all of the problems that we have on one of those groups, right? Without a true focus on the actual issues, right? Like, being able to just like find a problem, that's great. That's not the most important piece. The most important piece is figuring out, how do we come to the table with solutions for the problem, right? Not just screaming and hollering and figuring out whatever way you can to blame the other side for. We don't spend a lot of time on this campaign generally talking about our opponent. We don't, right? Nobody wants to hear me talk about her, right? Nobody wants to hear me really talk about me. What they want to hear me talk about is, how can we address the problems you have in your community, right? How can we work together to do that, right? How can we listen to you? How can we listen to your local leadership that you have, your state and local leadership? How can we take that and leverage the experience that we have at the federal government level and bring that to a place where we can best leverage it to try to get solutions to the real problems that we face in this district, right? And all these fears whether it's immigration or my opponent loves to throw out, trans kids playing girl sports. And it's just issues that we don't have here in the state of Alabama. You can't point me to a single example here in the state of Alabama where this is an issue. But you know what you can point me to? It's people who don't have a hospital anymore in their county, right? People who don't have medical coverage because Republicans won't expand Medicaid here in the state of Alabama. You can point me to too many people that are dying well below the average life expectancy for the United States of America. You can point me to people who don't have internet at home. You can point me to people who live off dirt roads where we need funding to get paved roads to them, right? You can point me to people who are going to schools where the state government will not pump resources into it. You can point me to people who wish that the state government would have pumped $1 billion into paying our teachers more or keeping some of these hospitals open as opposed to building a new prison, right? You can point me to those people who care about those issues, right? And that's the realities of it. So building this fear around certain groups of people because you think they are weaker or lesser than you, that's the biggest form of disinformation and misinformation that concerns me, right? It's like you show one hand up here arguing about these issues. Meanwhile, behind your back with your other hand, you're doing the real damage and the real work, right? To harm these communities or at least not look out for these communities in that way.
Man, I was going to, I'm still gonna do it, but you brought it home kind of hard just then.
Okay.
But I want you to look dead into this camera and ask your constituents for their vote.
Yeah, look, we just hit on a lot of it. I mean, at the end of the day, the role of a congressman is to go to Washington, D.C. to bring home the resources to address the local priorities in your community, in your county, in your city, in your state, right? It's not to go up there to play a broader part in some political game. It's not to go up there and do whatever a president tells you to do. It's not, to do whatever a political party tells you to do. It's called being a statesman, right? It's called being somebody that goes up there and puts the interests of your state first, the interests of the people who sent you there first and foremost, right? Not to, play around with all these national issues, right? As we've gone around this district, we've seen the local issues here that people are struggling with, and we have plans to address them, right? And so we are going to go to Washington, D.C., and we're going to fight for that funding, right? To incentivize the state of Alabama to expand Medicaid again, to provide more health insurance to people, 300,000 more people here in this state. We're going to go to fight for education dollars to modernize our academic infrastructure here across this district and across this state. We're going to go and fight for those infrastructure investments to bring those projects, to our communities here locally to create those good paying jobs of the future here in this district. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that we are protecting everyday people, to make sure that workers, right, to make sure that the people who make these companies go are treated fairly in all things that we do in government. And that's what you get in me. It's somebody that's going to go to Washington, D.C. with that in mind. At the end of the day, we have an opportunity here to send the type of leadership to Washington, D.C. that we have not had for some time. Like this, I'm from Mobile originally. Mobile has not had a Democrat representing them in Congress in well over 6 decades. Right? That the same can be said for other parts of this district as well. And so we have an opportunity now to put someone in Washington that's actually going to go there and go to bat for you. And so I humbly ask for your support, your prayers, and your vote on November the 5th.